Hi, Dual Group. My name is Deirdre Tim, and I am one of the dietetic interns working with Maggie. I have a little guest today. His name is Benjamin. This is my 3-month-old son. And we are sorry that we can't make it in today to talk with you guys in person. So we're going to do just a video here to talk about our topic, which is intuitive eating / mindfulness and how to follow hunger cues. So I have a handout for you guys that I'm hoping Maggie can print off for you. It just has 2 pages here. It's pretty short. So I was hoping for this to be kind of interactive, and it's going to be a little harder with us recording a video and having you guys listen to it. But hopefully maybe you guys can kind of just think about the questions as we're kind of going over them, and I can kind of give the kind of feedback that I would have if I was there. Okay, so I'm just going to start with the first question then and just see how that goes. Okay, so the first question that I have is, what motivates how and what types of food we eat? So this is kind of, there's a lot of factors that kind of go into what kinds of food we eat and how we can choose those. For some of us, it's based mostly on what we can afford. Sometimes it's based on our hunger and what we're feeling like eating that day. Sometimes it's based on what's available, where we are, what our location is. Other times it could be based on our familiarity. So we develop the types of food preferences that we have based on what we have grown up with and what's comfortable for us. Also, certain health conditions that we might have may dictate us to have less of certain things or more of certain things. And based on our life stage, we may choose to eat different things because of being younger and, maybe being really into candy. All right, we're just waiting for the connection. I'm hoping we're back, but I'm not quite sure. Okay, so how do we use our senses to enjoy food? So that's our second question. So we have 5 senses. We have our taste, we have our sight, we have our hearing, we have our, let me see here. Okay, so we have our ability to smell, taste, see, feel, and hear. So when we are eating things or about to eat things, we basically can use all of those senses, especially when it comes to just food. So examples would be smelling that plate of cookies as it comes out of the oven, or smelling the garlic bread as it's coming out of the oven, or maybe we're smelling an orange being peeled. And when we are tasting things, maybe we are tasting that citrus, or maybe we're tasting the sugary or the salty or the bitter, all those different kinds of flavors. And sight-wise can be one of the most important things too when it comes to food. If things are not aesthetically pleasing, we're probably not going to try them or have as much of an app to try them. Feeling, in a lot of cultures, they use their hands just to eat. They don't use utensils. And so sometimes getting to kind of feel the food before you eat it is important. And then hearing is kind of a weird sense to think about food, but for some people, they, will kind of crack nuts or other seafood open before they eat them. And that's something that they use, or sometimes you hear water boiling or hear food on the grill sizzling. So those are all senses that we use before eating food. So then the next thing I have on the list is just a list of different kinds of eaters. So when we talk about mindfulness and intuitive eating, there was basically a book that came out a while ago that is called intuitive eating. And when we talk about like different diets, a lot of times we think of the kinds of guidelines that are going to restrict certain foods and tell us kind of how to eat. But basically, a diet is just what we eat. So intuitive eating is a book that talks about not what to eat, but kind of how to eat. And it kind of talks about how to be more mindful when we're eating and show more appreciation for our food while we're eating. And it just gives you guidelines for how to do that. But something that they kind of talk about in that book is kind of figuring out what kind of eater you are. So there are 7 different kinds of eaters, as you can see on your sheet. So the first kind is the chaotic eater. So that's the person that is just kind of eats whenever, doesn't really have a routine, just, kind of eats when they feel like it. And then the unconscious eater is the person that maybe doesn't even realize how or what they're eating or how much they're eating. It's not that they're really focusing specific time for eating. They are more focusing eating to go with more important things that they have going on in their day. Then we have the emotional eater who eats based on how they're feeling. So maybe if they are sad, they're eating more or less. If they're really happy, maybe they're eating more, maybe they're eating less. So their types of eating are more based on their feelings. And then the waste not eater is the person who basically always has to clean their plate. They can't leave the table without having eaten everything. And maybe this is the type of eater that our parents have kind of taught us to be, of saying, well, you can't leave the table till you've eaten everything on your plate. And, you can't have dessert before you eat all of your vegetables. So that's kind of the kind of eater that a lot of people tend to get used to eating because of parental influence sometimes. And then we have the refuse not eater. And that's the person who feels bad about not eating something if something's been made, or maybe grandma's made all these Christmas cookies and you feel really bad if you don't take a couple when you're over to see her, or feel bad about not eating everything that she sent home with you. Then we have the restrictive eater, and this is the person who could be chronically always on a diet that they're trying to lose weight and trying to restrict something, like maybe they're not going to eat carbs anymore. So then they cut all carbs out in hopes to lose weight. But in turn, they're kind of making lists of what they think are good foods and bad foods, and avoiding the bad foods and only eating the good foods. And then the last type of eater is the mindful or intuitive eater. And that's kind of when we talk about having a healthy relationship with food, that's the type of eater that we hope to have everybody move towards. And so the intuitive eater and the mindful eater is the person that is conscious of their body's hunger signals. So they're eating when they're hungry, not eating when they're not necessarily hungry, just to eat. They eat until they're satisfied and don't have a fear of overeating. They trust themselves around food and experience no guilt from eating foods that they enjoy. And they're conscious and mindful of their food choices, which are mostly healthful foods. So then I have a couple questions for you guys, and I'll just kind of go over them. And most of them are more opinion. There's not really anything wrong with whatever answer you choose. It's not a right or wrong thing. But the 2 questions that I have for you, sorry. I'm looking at my answer sheet. I forgot I have a little bit more for your guys'. Sorry. Okay, so as I was kind of talking about with the intuitive eating, there's so the mindful or the intuitive eater is kind of what we are focusing on trying to be. And so there's 10 principles that they have that are basically supposed to kind of help you to learn how to be that intuitive eater. So I've kind of listed those for you and given descriptions, but I'll just kind of briefly go over it. So the first one is to reject that diet mentality of thinking that there's good foods and bad foods, and you want to eat some and avoid some. So in thinking about intuitive eating, there's no bad foods or good foods. All food is food, and it's more about eating for our body and for what our body needs, and not being so focused on calories and fat and all those things that a lot of time dictate what people eat or what people won't eat. The second one is to honor our hunger. And so, we may have cravings and we may have hunger cues, and sometimes we might ask ourselves, like, I just ate this many hours ago. I really don't need to eat something. I can't eat something yet. But learning to intuitively eat is learning to listen to whether we're actually hungry, and to give ourselves the food that we need and that we're wanting when we need it. And it's something that they actually talk about, how sometimes we crave things that we don't want. Like maybe we want to have that cookie, or maybe we want that piece of cake, or whatever is our sweet tooth, or whatever we're craving that we think maybe we shouldn't have. And so sometimes to avoid eating that, we'll eat other things, but we'll still keep that craving for what we want. And in turn, we eat like way more of other things that we don't need, but because we're just not filling our craving for what we want. So in turn, we eat more calories. And then at the end of the day, you still eat what you craved anyways, but you had all these other things too to try to avoid it. So sometimes if we just give in to what we want, we're actually not consuming as much, because we're feeding and giving our body what it wants. So honoring our hunger is that second one. Making peace with food. So again, that goes back to rejecting the diet mentality, to stop thinking of some foods as being good and some foods as being bad. Challenging the food police. So asking ourselves why one thing is good for us and why something else is bad for us. And just learning to appreciate food for being food, and understanding that every food item has a place. And then the fifth and sixth one kind of go together. So that's respecting your fullness and discovering the satisfaction factor. So that's, starting to eat a meal, and then, taking a couple bites in, and listening to ourselves and saying, okay, are we still hungry? Are we still enjoying what we're eating? And if so, then you keep eating. And if not, then you just stop. And so by listening to that, we are less apt to overeat and stuff ourselves to the point where we're not happy anymore, and not eating too little that we're going to be hungry, an hour later and need something else, that we're filling ourselves up with what we need, but not overfilling ourselves up. Okay, then number 7 is honoring your feelings without using food. So a lot of times we have grown up with, maybe you win a sports event or something, or you participate in a sports event, and to celebrate, you go out and get ice cream. Now, there's nothing wrong with having ice cream, but it's not sometimes the most helpful thing to use food as being rewards of thinking, oh, I, didn't do this, so I can't eat this now because I didn't win this, or, oh, I won this, so now I can eat this, that kind of mindset can lead to some disordered eating patterns that we don't really want. And so a more healthful avenue would be to use non-food items as rewards, or to be the things that we restrict because we didn't win something. But to use food as that is not necessarily to make the most healthy relationship with food. Okay, then number 8 is respecting our body. a lot of people have body issues when it comes to wishing that they were skinnier or they had maybe more muscles or whatnot. And so part of intuitive eating is being able to look at yourself and appreciate who you are and whatever size you are, and to not be using food as, well, it's kind of like using that emotional food aspect, but not to overeat because you feel bad about how you look, or not eating at all because you feel bad about how you look, or just, abusing food that way. But more to appreciate who we are, I guess. Number 9 is exercise. So you're using, so a lot of people don't like the term exercise, but just a more healthful thing to think about it is to do movement in a way that feels good for you. So you don't necessarily have to be deliberately exercising just to I don't know, to burn off calories maybe about something you ate that you feel bad about, but more just taking a walk because it feels nice for you and it helps get you in a good headspace, but not necessarily using it to get rid of food or anything like that. Again, that's if we're trying to burn off calories because of what we ate, then we're not necessarily giving ourselves the best relationship with food. And then number 10 is to honor your health. And so that just talks about eating food that tastes good, eating food that we enjoy. And there's a lot of food that's really good for our health because of the vitamins and minerals it contains. And so sometimes that means just choosing those food items because we know that they're going to do good things for our bodies. And yeah. Okay, so then now we have the questions at the end, now that we've kind of talked about the principles of intuitive eating. So how do we practice mindful eating? So do we practice by choosing to allow ourselves to eat the items that we want without judging our foods based on a good or a bad food list? Do we do that by using all of our senses to appreciate our food before we eat it? Do we do that by listening to our hunger cues to guide us to what we want to eat or how much to eat, or all of the above? So the correct answer is going to be all of the above or any of them. So intuitive eating is rejecting that good or bad food list and just putting food as food and understanding that there's a place for all food. It's using all of our senses to appreciate the food that we are eating. And then it's listening to our hunger cues to determine what we are wanting to eat, how much we're wanting to eat, what we need to satisfy ourselves. And then number 5 is kind of a personal question for all of you guys. But what would you view as being the best benefit to eating mindfully? Is it being able to eat whatever you want without judging yourselves? Is it having a positive relationship with food? Is it being at a healthful weight? Or is it paying more attention to the types and amounts of foods that we eat? So for me personally, the biggest benefit that I would have would be having that positive relationship with food, because it is going to leave me in a better headspace and not make me feel guilty about things later on. And it's not going to negatively affect my relationship with exercise or with other components of my life, because I'm going to have a good relationship with food, and it's going to make pretty much all aspects of my life pretty good. Okay, so the last thing of this presentation for you guys is just practicing a little mindful eating with apple slices. Now, I don't know if you guys will have a chance to do this. I don't know if you guys will even get to see this video. But if you do, and if you are, the video, it's a 5-minute video. It's just going to kind of try to challenge you to use all of your senses to eat an apple slice. I hope nobody's allergic. And if you are, I mean, you can do this with any fruit. And there's many different videos out there that talk about mindful eating. And I don't know, some of it's a little comical. So just, bear with me with that. But it is, it's a new thing in class. Maybe you'll have a chance to outside of class. I've attached the link so you guys can do that on your own if you want. Okay. So I also have sent Maggie some more Jeopardy things. So if you guys have time, there's some more Jeopardy. Again, I'm sorry I wasn't able to make it in, but with the roads being so bad and living so far away, I couldn't get in. But I will hopefully see you guys next week. All right. Bye.